Let me start recording. So hi, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I think this is a really important topic to discuss, and I'm super glad that you're all here. So today we have a few presenters and moderators. I'm Natalia Hasso. I serve as Executive Director for Inclusion Suite, and we're a local nonprofit in San Antonio that provides vocational training to people with disabilities. Sabrina, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Sabrina Epstein. I help run Artful Start in San Antonio, which provides art programming to children and young adults with disabilities. And I've also been involved in various anti-police violence work, and mostly in Baltimore, where I go to college.
Larissa?
Hi, I'm a founder and executive director of Circle of Arms. We are we advocate and promote mental health awareness through education and fill gaps in the community.
And Rodney, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Deputy Rodney Rangel with the Bexar County Sheriff's Office, Autism and Special Needs Liaison. And what I do is I'm basically inform all the deputies about autism awareness and special needs.
Awesome, thank you. So just some general guidelines. It's easiest if we all stay on mute when we're not talking, just so that we avoid background noise and echoing and things like that that can be kind of distracting. You can send questions in the chat. If you want to send them to everyone, then I can see them. But if you only want to send them to one person, don't send them to me, but send them to Sabrina so she can read them out loud if you want them to be anonymous. And I think she put a message in the chat so you know where to look. Just some ground rules too before we start this discussion. No one knows everything. We all have various levels of experience in the disability community and with police and different things like that, but none of us know everything, and so it's just important to have kind of grace with each other as we navigate this, because I know it can be kind of a touchy topic. We're going to use I statements, so I feel, not like you're making me feel or whatever, but I don't think we'll get too conflicted. Avoid generalizations and assumptions, just overall respect confidentiality, and let's really try to lean into our discomfort, because we're all here to learn and grow and to try to really understand this issue from all angles and what we can do to make our city and just the world in general a better, more inclusive place for people with disabilities. So our objectives are to raise awareness about the issue and how it disproportionately affects the deaf community, disabled community, just in general, and to provide relevant resources. We have some that are specific to San Antonio and some that are like more national, just so that you can be aware of alternatives maybe and different resources. So some definitions before we start. Just so we're all on the same page about what these words kind of mean, the topics that we're discussing. So ableism is discrimination or prejudice against anyone with a disability, and an access barrier is something that prevents people from disabilities from using standard facilities, equipment, and resources. So like having stairs instead of a ramp would be an access barrier. Accessibility is modification to allow people with disabilities to participate in life. Implicit bias is an interesting one. It's like unconscious bias that you unknowingly hold, and it can be found. There's been a lot of implicit bias studies of how the implicit biases affect how people interact in the real world, even if they're not necessarily aware of them. Intersectionality is basically the intersections of social justice. So we're going to show a video from the National Council of Independent Living in a little bit. And it talks about how like disabled people of color are more likely to have a negative encounter with the police and things like that. So that's intersectionality. Police brutality is excessive or unnecessary force. Race is a group of people who have physical similarities, and racism is the belief that one race is better than another one. Does anybody have any questions on any of that, just to clarify, or any other terms? Okay. So why is this an issue? 1/3 to 1/2 of people who are killed during an encounter with the police have a disability, according to a 2016 media report by the Rudderman Family Foundation. That's like almost a half. And they estimate that it could be even up to 83%, depending on what you count as a disability. If you count all mental illnesses under that category, or the physical disabilities,
Yeah, I like it when not.
things like that.
Wait, can be red.
So we're gonna watch a video. It's from the We Can't Breathe toolkit by the National Council on Independent Living. It's kind of hard to watch, so just be mindful of your responses, especially if you have trauma in this area, just to be really sure that you have a safe place to process it. And it's 11 minutes long, so if you need to turn away or turn it off for whatever reason, you are free to come back after the video. So I'm gonna go ahead and play that now.
Trigger warning: police, gun, and taser violence.
So do we have any initial thoughts on that? If anyone wants to share their initial reaction, or if you learned anything new, or which of the narratives had the biggest impact on you, you can feel free to unmute and share.
That was a great video.
Yeah, was there anything that really stood out to you, Danielle?
All of it.
That's good. Does anybody else want to share initial reactions, anything?
I think my concern was there any like I know San Antonio Police Department, they have like a little I forgot what it is, where they have officers who go to calls with people who have a mental disability, or not even mental, any kind of disability. What a majority of these could have been prevented if they just had that one person to say, you know what, here, let me send a special, patrol out to assess this. Because I mean, the one with the 10 officers chasing after one guy with a knife, if there would have been one person just talking to him, they could have de-escalated it, I'm sure, pretty quick. He was probably more scared than anything and not trying to hurt no one. He was defending himself, and then he died because of that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Education is definitely the key, I think, to help de-escalate these situations, like you said. Does anyone else have anything they want to share or bring up?
Yes. With those kind of situations, hopefully there will be somebody that will contact the mental health unit, and that will probably solve some of those issues that happening.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a big part of what you do, which I know we'll talk about a little bit later. I have slides. But
yeah, a question I have is, I know that the San Antonio Police Department has a team of, I want to say maybe 10 to 12 mental health unit actually trained officers. So I don't think that's enough necessarily for how big our city is. And not only that, I'm not sure, but maybe Rodney, you can let me know. I'm not aware of Bexar County having a unit specifically for like a mental health unit like the SAPD has.
Yes, Bexar County Sheriff's Office, we do have a mental health unit, and that's one of the ones that contact me sometimes when we have situations with people that are on the autism spectrum. They get with me.
Is it only autism, or is it any mental health?
Mental health unit, that's for mental health issues that do go on and throughout the whole throughout Bexar County.
All right, so Bexar County has its own mental health unit. So if somebody wants to call and report, they can ask for a mental health officer.
Yeah.
And we'll be going over some additional resources of local mental health responders as well, so that you have all the options equipped if a crisis does arise. Yeah, I think that's really key.
Yeah, me too. So Larissa, do you want to talk more about what you do? I have your slides here.
Oh, sure, definitely. Am I next? Oh, okay. So again, like I said in the beginning, we are advocating and promoting mental health awareness through education. And one of the ways we do that is through a certifying course called Mental Health First Aid. We certify the community. So we have different demographics, like we have military, veteran mental health first aid. We have adult, youth mental health first aid. We have public safety mental health first aid, and older adults, higher education. So there's a lot of demographics, but I definitely I wish this was implemented throughout our community and everybody was certified, because it just gives more awareness and has more knowledge, and just more people can provide that empathy. It's a five-step program where people learn the signs and symptoms of somebody developing a mental health disorder or mental health issue, and it also helps to kind of help them de-escalate or know when to call for additional professional resources, and also how to intervene in a crisis. We fill gaps and we do all kinds of things, so trainings and workshops, but I definitely just kind of wanted to highlight on some of the issues right now with policing and mental illness, and some of them you all saw with the videos that we just watched. But basically, when officers are called, they're usually the first responders when answering a call about a mental illness. And so, sometimes they get the information, correct, and sometimes it's not. So at that point, which brings me to the next bullet, they have to then wear two hats, which is one of a social worker and one of a law enforcement. So then that kind of negates what their primary training is, compared to, okay, now I have to kind of go into this social worker field, or kind of not diagnosing, but trying to recognize signs and symptoms, also under pressure, under what, not knowing, what could happen. And so, any mishap or lapse of judgment could be critical for the officer or for the person with the mental illness. As we could see in these last videos, unfortunately, the officers, maybe they were not trained, in mental health and how to respond, but it was, it was a destinance for the people with the mental illness. And there probably has been officers that have been hurt or even, killed by somebody who has a mental illness as well, because maybe they let down their guard for maybe a few moments or whatnot. And so people with mental illnesses aren't necessarily more violent or prone to criminal behavior. They're just usually experiencing a crisis and they just need help. If officers don't have proper training when responding to mental health crisis, things can escalate quickly, very quickly. According to the Treatment Advocacy Center, people with untreated mental illnesses are 16 times more likely to be killed by officers. In most cases, the individual is armed, and the report called in by a relative or a friend was due to individual behaving erratically. So sometimes they don't even know that they are armed. And again, like one of the videos, maybe they're not armed, but they have something that looks like maybe a weapon. So then that's going to trigger the officer to automatically think, that they may be in harm. Mm-hmm. So if we continue to train our officers in the crisis intervention training, which is a 40-hour program, which is essential because it definitely goes more into depth as far as training and how to respond. But in addition, we should also include mental health first aid because it's a shorter version of it. And so it doesn't take 40 hours. So I think that, yes, officers should take the CIT course, but maybe quarterly, or maybe, in between the CIT training, include a mental health first certification as a refresher. In-depth training for de-escalation protocols, plus empathy and ethics training quarterly. Involve mental health professionals to assess officers, or add mental health screening questions to 911 dispatch. Those are just maybe some things that could possibly help. Next slide. And then families of individuals with mental health are scared to call the police sometimes because they just don't know how the police are going to respond, or how the behavior of their loved one, if it's going to escalate. And And sometimes the family could be hurt as well because they're so nervous about calling the officers. So it's not only just, the individual, it's the families that could be at risk as well. And so mental health crisis in US is a medical issue, not a police issue. And what we should do is restore mental health systems for early diagnosis, less waiting times, and consistent monthly follow-ups.
Yeah, thank you.
Just wanted to let you know too, if anybody's interested in, learning more about mental health first aid and how to get certified, please let me know. I don't know if we're going to have our contact information. I forgot to put it on the slide, but you can reach me at Circle of Arms 19, and I'll put it in the chat, circleofarms19@gmail.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So what can we do? So there are certain things we can do to create a safety plan. There's a really, really good toolkit that Sabrina found from the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network. And there's one for self-advocates and there's one for parents and caregivers. And it has really plain language, lays out what to do during an encounter with the police and a safety plan that you can create. It has resources of what to do if you're a person with a disability and you're missing, you run away. It has solutions for elopement. So this is a really good resource, and we will definitely send it out in an email. But it's a really, really good resource, and it has so much available that we didn't want to just read it all to you. We considered it. There's other things too, nonviolent crisis intervention. Like Larissa said, the Crisis Prevention Institute, CPI, they have a variety of trainings. It's definitely more of an investment, time-wise and financially. And they just started a new verbal intervention training course that I think is available virtually that is better for if you have like a hands-off policy at where you work or with the individuals that you work with to help de-escalate situations without using physical methods like restraints. But they also have nonviolent crisis resolution training that does have more of the restraint training if it gets to that point. Circle of Arms has the mental health first aid certifications, and there's also the CIT training, the crisis intervention training, available from the National Alliance on Mental Illness, the San Antonio chapter. So that's a good resource too, especially if you're close to someone with a disability or you think that this situation might happen, or maybe it has happened to someone close to you. It's good to have the skills to be able to kind of de-escalate things so maybe it doesn't get to the point of needing to call the police. And there are also other resources that we can use that we'll talk about in a little bit. Right here, actually. So there's crisis resources specific to San Antonio for mental health crisis. The Center for Healthcare Services has a mobile crisis outreach team, and they have a separate team for children and adults. So if your loved one is having a mental health crisis and you call this number, they'll send a team out to help you, and they have a special team for children, which I think is really cool. There's also the DBSA text chat. If someone is nonverbal and experiencing a mental health crisis, or if they are deaf and not able to talk on the phone or something like that, you can text home to 741-741, Rape Crisis Center, and there's an online chat for that. And then for child abuse, you can report it to Child Safe, or you can, there's a drop-in center for youth at Warren Moss Youth Alternatives called Centro Seguro La Puerta. And that's good for children who have been affected by homelessness, sex trafficking, abuse, runaways. It's open 24 hours a day, and it's drop in, drop out. So they have counseling and like a hot meal and a safe place to sleep available. So that is a great resource. Local initiatives. So Stand Up SA.
Natalia, can I add something about the last slide?
Go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that for most of these services, especially the Center for Healthcare Services and the Rape Crisis Center, which can both provide in-person responders in situations, it's not necessarily like separate from the police. They both do work with the police, but it's really helpful to have someone very specialized to call. And if the situation escalates further and there's need for that involvement, they know how to do so and know how to call the correct contacts like we were talking about earlier. So I would just recommend people, I mean, we all want to think that we're not going to have these emergencies, but they do happen, and it's scary to be an emergency. And I'm very sympathetic and understand that, of course, you just want to call 911. That's the easiest thing. So if you put these numbers in your phone, save them in your contacts, just so you know if a loved one or yourself or someone around you you're concerned about, you have someone to call that will be able to handle it accordingly and make those difficult decisions about whether they need to be hospitalized or call the police, but that won't escalate it further.
Yeah, thank you. And we will send these out in an email too, so you can add them to your phone, or if you want to take a screenshot, we'll have it all ready. So local initiatives, Stand Up SA is a really cool, it's kind of just getting started. They have trained caseworkers and credible messengers who work to identify and intervene in violent situations. So they work especially with youth to try to de-escalate situations before they start, particularly with gang violence and things like that. They work in Lincoln Courts, Spring Hill, and Wheatley Courts for right now, so they're just focused on those neighborhoods, but that's another great resource to intervene in situations before they begin. And they also have a lot of de-escalation training. The Samuel Allen Law is something that was recently passed in Texas. It allows drivers with communication impairments, such as the ones listed on the screen, to have a special designator on their driver's license. So in the event that they're pulled over, all they have to do is hand the officer their license. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Rodney, but doesn't it have, can it be linked to your license plate? So when the officer runs the plate, it comes up?
Yes, from what I spoke with Jennifer Allen a while back when this was first going in. Supposedly it goes into TLETs, and it lets officers know when they're pulling over the vehicle that they have a speech impediment, which a communication impediment, for people with autism and other diagnoses as well, and they would have to get that from DPS.
Yeah.
So is it an actual, like a card, like an extra card, or is it on their driver's license?
It's on their driver's license.
Oh, okay. So you would have to go into DMV and fill out this application and take it to get a new license with that specific code on there?
Yes.
Yeah. The license plate will also show right before the officers approach the vehicle.
Okay.
Yeah, so it just has.
I know this, yeah, this started out like I think in North Carolina or some other state. I saw that where they have like an extra card. But when did this pass, you said?
It's recent, right? In the past like 2 years?
Beginning of the year, or
yeah.
Before then?
Awesome.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good resource to help the officer be informed of the situation, especially like if someone could be diabetic and experiencing a low blood sugar emergency, like that could be perceived as drunk driving. But if they're aware in advance before they even make contact with the person, I think that's a really cool way to prevent misunderstandings.
So Rodney, I don't know if you're going to talk about this when you speak, but are you going to talk about like what is the process that you would go through when you do find out that somebody has the Samuel Allen Law on their license, or are you going to go through like what the process would be?
The process, from what I know, is when I spoke to her the last time, I believe you would have to get a paper from DMV, and then you end up taking it to your doctor, having them fill it out with the diagnosis, and then you take it back to them to verify that they have that specific diagnosis.
Well, I'm sorry, I meant like the officers that pull somebody over that has this. What are they supposed to do? What is the process?
The process, I'm not too sure exactly how that goes, but from what I understand, it just notifies them either through dispatch or through the TLET system, and it'll let them know what diagnosis that they have at that time prior to pulling them over.
Okay. And is in any way, again, I'm sorry, I'm just asking all these questions, but is any way of this used because of the Disability Act? is this going in any way hinder that, as far as, let's say, because people use their driver's license to get a job, to, vote, to get a, just anything. So if they have this particular marker on their license, I know people can say that they don't discriminate, but is it going to be like, a health, what do you call it, HIPAA violation?
That's a really interesting point that I never thought of. I believe it's like in the codes that are on the back of your license, like the ones that say you have to wear glasses, and like it's like code A, B, or whatever, like it's like a letter number thing. Is that right, Rodney? I don't really know.
Well, yeah, it's just something I would probably want to know, and because I definitely think this is good and we need it, but at the same time, we don't want to open up more discrimination for people on the card. Yeah, definitely.
That's
there
really interesting.
A person we can contact to find out who's in, to get more details on that?
I'll find a contact for that. Rodney, do you have one?
No, for that, no, it would have to go through DPS.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll work on that, and we'll make sure to send it out to everyone as part of the resource list.
And this is what the paper looks like that it's just a picture of it from the website, what the paper looks like that you take to the doctor to fill out. But I think, yeah, it's relatively recent, so I don't know who all is familiar with it yet, but there definitely is information. I think if you go to aspergers101.com, that's Jennifer Ellen's website, Samuel's mom. So that has a lot of information about it. Rodney, it's your turn.
So I've been with the Bexar County Sheriff's Office since 2008, going on already 12 years. I do have a son that's on the autism spectrum. Back then, they appointed me as the autism liaison about almost 2 years ago. So what keeps me going is my little boy who's on the autism spectrum. So I try to do everything that I can to make sure that individuals like him with autism are safe out here in the community. Some of the things that I've worked on, and it took me quite a bit. I found a lot of information about the same kind of thing about how they're doing license plates. I found out information that I was able to flag and use those caution signs for police officers when they end up running into somebody that's on the autism spectrum or that has special needs. So what I end up getting done is I got with dispatch, and they ended up typing out kind of like a policy or memo for all the supervisors, and they fill out a form that I just researched online. It's a temporary form for right now until I get another one approved. What it does is, as a parent and a police officer, I would like for, if they were to ever run into my child or whoever ends up having a child with autism or special needs, and they get lost for whatever reason, or they have behavioral issues at that, I want them to know exactly how to calm them down, where to look for, if there's pools nearby, or if there's certain things when they end up eloping and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So the best thing to do is to give that information to the police officers. That way we can help, and that we can prevent all those incidents out there in the street, or things that you've heard on the news, try to prevent those from happening. So what I always say, it's like a instruction manual. As a parent, giving it over to the police officer if any of those end up happening. So when they give me that form, I get that form, and I send it over to dispatch supervisors. Dispatch, they enter it in the system, and they put a caution note, strictly with specific behaviors. If they have behavior issues, if they're nonverbal, verbal, or do they elope, and things like that. Gives us even when they have those certain behaviors where the parent can't handle them anymore, and they end up calling 911 for assistance. So maybe we can go over those that form that they gave us, and maybe we can be some kind of assistance versus officer going over there and not knowing what he's going to be into. Dispatch will let the officer know, and it would also come up on the computer as well.
Yeah, so just to kind of help de-escalate those situations before they even start. Corey, did you have your hand up? Sorry, I just saw that. No?
I did.
Oh,
One question I have a nephew who is also on a broad spectrum of autism. And last time that he was, having a episode, he actually had to get out of the car, and he was, being very loud and, trying to hit my sister. And so when the police were called, they ended up taking him and putting him in the police car, and saying that they were going to take him to I think a hospital or whatnot. I guess what I'm thinking, is that more traumatic to them because they're being taken, even though that they say the mom, the parent is following them, they took him in the police car to the hospital. But I feel like that would be so traumatic to them, thinking that they're going to go to jail, or just thinking, anything. But maybe I get it for safety purposes, but is there maybe another alternative to that, to having them have to drive in the police car?
As of right now, that would only be, from what I know, the only transportation when police officers are called.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the time, they're ended up for situations like that, they're trying to get them the help that they need. And obviously, during those specific times, when they're having some kind of behavior issue, it can be an item, it can be a memory, it can be all sorts of things when it comes down to autism. And what they end up doing is most times they emergency detain them and they take them to a hospital. That way they can get some kind of help, because
Right.
most of the time what I've noticed is that they can have mental health issues too. You can have both. You
Right.
have mental health issues, and that's one.
Comorbidities are really common in that population.
Right. I just feel like it escalates things, but then it also gives them maybe a false fear of officers, because then they are not looked at so much as as a helper, or somebody that's I'm just trying to think if there's maybe a different way to approach it, because again, we don't want them fearing an officer, because a lot of times, and I know this happens with other individuals and adults with kids with autism, is that they say, we're going to have to call the police and they're going to have to detain you. So then it starts looking as a negative than a positive.
Mm-hmm.
Just a thought. I don't know. I don't really know what maybe a different vehicle, maybe that's not a police officer, or a car, I don't know. It's just a thought, because I just know that my nephew, when that happened, he really it just kind of affected him.
Mm-hmm.
That's another reason why we're providing these other resources, like the mental health crisis ones, who are able, if it's a nonviolent situation. I'm not super familiar with the policies in Texas, but there is some sort of law that if there is a threat of violence involved, at some point the social workers or crisis responders do have to involve the police. But if it's more just behavioral and mental health care, they can take them in a crisis response vehicle that's not police. But that does mean you have to be informed about who to call, which is not everyone is. Right.
And when that's happening, you're not going to Google best mental health hotline. 911 is just what you think of. So I think definitely education is key. And I think also trying to build positive relationships. ACOG has a program where individuals with disabilities can learn how to interact with officers and meet them. Right, Rodney? Don't you facilitate that?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think that can help create positive relationships and connotations there.
And you offer that for like parents of children as well, or?
Yes. So what ended up happening is I teamed up with ACOG a while back, and since this whole pandemic, we haven't been really able to do any of that most of the time. But when we were doing it, we ended up having individuals with different disabilities, autism, and all that. We ended up, I'm sorry, we ended up having them be there and actually interact with police officers, watch the safe video, what to do, what not to do when approached with a police officer. And then toward the end, toward the middle, we'll end up having conversations that way they can understand and be, actually be in their shoes and understand where they're actually coming from. Because I take my son every now and then when we would have those situations, those trainings, and I would have them, hey, go ahead and talk with him. At the time he was nonverbal, so it made it real difficult. And a lot of officers might not understand what autism is, or they're barely getting into this kind of career and stuff like that. So this kind of training, they were able to actually sit down, talk with him, interact, go sit in police vehicles, turn on some lights, and have some fun.
Yeah, I think it definitely helps, like, from both sides. It helps the people with disabilities feel more comfortable with police officers and like learn what that looks like, and then helps the officers learn how to interact as well. So I think that's a really cool program. That's really awesome that you're doing that. Let's see. And then, here's your safety tips I got from your brochure.
One of the other things that you had on the slide was one of the major things is we end up having the safety stickers.
Yes, I have the link for those in, like, it's in, I think, a few slides.
So we have Alzheimer's, diabetes, autism, special needs, and death as well.
So you can put these on, like, your car or your house, right? Like, they're available. And it says that they're available at the 2 sheriff's substations. And I believe you can also request them to be mailed to you, right?
Oh, awesome.
I believe so. I would have to check in with that.
I think so. I think it's on the website.
Can you go back a slide? Or was it, did we miss it? Oh, wait, what was this one? Oh, no, the other one.
This one?
The one that you just, that one. Oh,
yeah,
okay. Okay.
Has just the, just letting the officer know, or letting any emergency responder know that there may be different styles of communication, different methods of communication, or confusion, things like that. I think that can really help, just informing people in advance. And if you're not in Bexar County, because I know some people are from out of town, there are different options available online. These are just a few I pulled up off of Etsy, but there are so many. If you just Google, there's like window stickers that can really help inform emergency responders, and or seatbelt covers. The seatbelt covers I know are kind of tricky because, like, you don't necessarily know that person's going to be sitting in that spot in the event of an accident. So just, like, if you get that, be careful that you know, like, that you only have it when they're wearing it.
Right.
But yeah, does anybody have any questions or comments or anything they wanted to add or share for anyone?
Is there any way to contact Officer Rangel on getting more information on the unit, the mental health unit, on how it works? I would just like to get more information and get how it works, because not everyone knows how the system works on it, and I just want to get a little bit more information. Can we contact you, or is there a number?
Yes, I have a county business phone. It's going to be 210-404-8902. (8902)
404-8902.
Yes, and I can also.
And I wrote that down, and I'll share that with everyone also.
Perfect.
Okay, I'm going back to the kids with autism and broad spectrum, because I've been thinking for a while now, because of my nephew, how I can do things to kind of help, and so because we are a mental health advocate, we also make these breathing tools that are they're like laminated, and I put like a little string so they can hang on to them, like on their in their pocket or around their wrist, but it kind of just remembers and shows them like a shape or something, and it shows them how to breathe, 1, 2, 3, and they kind of follow it. But I was also thinking, maybe creating these little bags, so if you do have to pick up and detain a child, or anybody with autism, that maybe to make it a pleasant ride, depending of course on the situation, but putting one of those breathing tools in there, putting just maybe a fidget thing, something that they can mess with, Play-Doh, things that are calming, and then kind of have those little bags in the car.
Yeah, we can I can get with you on something like that if we were ever having a situation. But if it's to extreme situations,
right,
we would have to take
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
When you brought that up, I really am asking the community as a whole, if to help us as police officers, to let us know, like if you have somebody, you're with somebody at that time that has a mental health issue or on the autism spectrum, we're not going to be 100%. We need to know directly from the community, if you're with that person, to let us know, give us a heads up, because even out there, look at my son, for instance. You're gonna think of him as just a little boy, just being a little boy, but not seeing that disability at all. So it comes down to is that as police officers, it makes it very, very difficult for us to to see any of those identifiers. So if there's some kind of medical bracelet or medical identifier or anything, that will be a big help to us.
There's information about that in the Autistic Self-Advocacy, in the safety toolkit. It has different, like, to wear a bracelet, or how to teach a child with autism, if they're verbal, to communicate that to a police officer. Because I know they really try to discourage the special identification cards, because we don't want anyone to be reaching for a card and have that be perceived as reaching for a weapon. But yeah, I think it's just also important to remember, like the quote, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, so that everyone is different, and everyone has different mannerisms and behaviors. Yeah. And so it's just like unique to the individual. Let's see. Joseph, you asked, what about kids with CP? Do you have any specific concerns? I can unmute you for a little bit.
Yeah. What about if you get away with CP?
What about kids with CP?
Yeah.
I think it's important for officers to be aware of all different kinds of disabilities, for sure, so that they can help manage crises. Are there any specific situations that you're concerned about, Joseph?
No.
No, just
Joseph, one thing that I would say is that I know a lot of my friends with CP may just speak slower in general, and that's certainly something that officers need to be aware of. Just because, everyone communicates differently, but unfortunately sometimes speaking slowly or having difficulty speaking is perceived in a crisis as being difficult to handle. So that's one thing that I would consider specific to CP as an issue when we're talking about this. And that's maybe something, if you're thinking about those different stickers you can put on the car or identifications, or just what you would want to have someone help you communicate in a crisis, that's something I would think about.
Yeah, me too.
That's really good, Sabrina.
Thanks so much, Joseph. I appreciate your input.
Yes. Sorry, are you muted, Corey? I'm so sorry. I know you've had your hand raised for so long. It won't let me unmute you. Can you try again? You're still muted. Let me see. Oh, there you
Can
go.
you hear me now?
Yes.
So I think the bottom line when it comes to interacting with different levels of disabilities is for that officer to have that compassion. Yes, the training is an excellent resource, but I think the bottom line is for that officer to have compassion. And that's the biggest thing. And the other one is patience. You gain further knowledge if you're on your own. You investigate and learn more about the different disabilities. That's what a lot of our officers at the sheriff's office. A lot of them have compassion. They come up to me, ask me different questions. Hey, how do I deal with this when I get out the street? So with me as a deaf liaison, my job is to educate and expose my officers on giving them tools when they make a traffic stop. They have a deaf person or whatnot. They do also understand if it's a more difficult situation or a scenario that they have access to an interpreter. And that's the other thing. They have options. But I'm trying to work on a long-term project, which was create a curriculum where we can do sign language, teach the officers the basic so they can communicate to different people. But here in the sheriff's office, we have great resources. We have a lot of officers like Rodney that want to help out the community.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for joining us. Does anybody else have any questions or comments or anything to share? I think this was really good. I think it's a really important conversation to have, especially now. We're seeing stuff on the news all the time. And I think it's gonna be really good to build these relationships and just to help everyone stay safe and no matter what, regardless of disability. I think it's really important. So thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you so much, Natalia, and everyone who contributed. It's certainly can be very scary to see all these situations, but for me to hear people in San Antonio working on this from so many different angles and being really thoughtful about next steps to be more disability inclusive in all of our crisis response, whether that's law enforcement or non-law enforcement, it makes me feel like we're building a safer community for all of us. So thank you to everyone who contributed to this in various ways.
Yeah.
I had one other thing. Let's just be proactive. That's why.
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest things that I take is be proactive, and let's prevent any of those situations that happen in other states.
Yes, of course. Yeah, to be proactive with the education, with the information. Yeah, just to try to always be proactive, not reactive, I think is the best way to go about things from all levels. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.